This video is for documentary purposes only. Anything shown here is in legal states, 100% legal. Nothing shown is harmful or dangerous.
Every year, it seems like variety shrinks more and more. We get less and less dank, and it seems like only the obscure breeders or the obscure grows, the small guys, are putting out the really good stuff. You pop something and you're expecting it to be a little different, and it turns out to just be another Runts cross or a Sherb cross or something that the breeder didn't necessarily label properly. Now in this video, I want to investigate why this may be and what we can do as a community to change this. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. So if you're new here, my name is Rob and we talk all things herb. Today in particular, we're going to be trying to figure out exactly why these genetics are becoming so similar, so watered down, and the diversity is kind of vanishing in this space. But before we do that, quick shout out to the sponsors who help make videos like this happen for free and also provide some amazing discount codes for the community. Now, if you're tired of fighting the heat in the grow space, check out VivoSun's AeroLush CO8 Intelligent Air Conditioner. This thing is built for growers, and it's not just some random AC unit. You can control this right from your phone with the VivoSun app, track temp, humidity, and VPD all in real time. And it's a part of their whole smart grow ecosystem. It's portable too, so there's no wall installs or cutting vents. Just roll it out, plug it in, and you're set up. It's got cooling, heating, drying, and fan modes, so you can keep your room dialed in all year long. Super efficient, quiet, and it even restarts automatically if your power goes out, which comes in clutch, trust me. VivoSun's really building out some dope stuff here. From lights, tents, fans, everything to control your entire grow. It's all connected. So if you're trying to level up your garden, use discount code CLtv or CLtv Watch on Amazon. And if you're looking for some reliable genetics, head over to Seedsman. And they got you covered for some of the widest selections online. Use discount code CLtv at checkout. So when it comes down to genetics, more and more it seems the diversity is lacking. We're dealing with things like runts, cookies, gelatos, sherbs, and their great-grandkids at this point. There's so many replica genetics as well when it comes to getting something like a White Widow or AK-47. And I talked about this in another video, I'll drop below in the description as well. Essentially, these are often white label genetics. They're just renamed and they're not necessarily the best representation. If anything, they're a replica. Maybe the same parents, not the same exact genetic that you're looking for. Now, this plant didn't just start with cookies or gelato or Skittles. It had a long story of land races in heirloom genetics that kind of helped shape the space. Now, these weren't made in labs or dispos. They were shaped in mountains, jungles, deserts, and the farmers who cultivated them. Now, in the Hindu Kush Mountains of Central Asia, growers work with a squat, resin-heavy plant built to survive harsh, cold climates. And that's where the short, stocky look with broad leaves and dense buds come from. In Southeast Asia, Kai varieties stretch tall like vines, flowering for months and months, delivering some tropical, unique, really diverse flavors. In Southern Africa, Malawi Gold earned its reputation for a long-lasting electric effect that just really hit hard. Lines like Colombian Gold, Acapulco Gold, they really stood out for their uplifting effect. Obviously, that crazy color, unique flavors, and I think that's why people still talk about stuff like that today. Maybe more old heads, but I guess I'm an old head now. Now, by the 1970s, seeds from those regions started moving around the world. Breeders in California started grabbing them, and even in the Netherlands. And they started crossing those and sparking totally different genetics, and they created the golden age of hybrids. Now, things like skunk were built from Afghani, Colombian, and Mexican. Obviously, I've gone over that video. If you haven't seen it, check it out below in the description. And it became one of the first stabilized lines that growers could depend on. Northern Lights, born in the Pacific Northwest, is set at standard for that indoor growing, the compact, resinous, and unique hash makers. Haze from Santa Cruz was the opposite though. This was that long flowering, kind of trickier to grow, but definitely famous for that citrus, spice, floral, and unique effect. Now, then came the underground legends, the ones that you had to know a guy for. Something like Chemdog. In '91, popped that seeds from the Grateful Dead show and came that Chemdog. A cut that just changed the game as well when it moved its way around, and some say made sour diesel. Now, if you've seen my documentaries on those, it'll definitely explain more detail, but it just is amazing where you see a lot of these genetics come from. You look at like OG Kush made its way around the West, some say from Florida, but dominated California. Now, these are those origin stories that a lot of them go by oral history, but they're just things that I feel are getting lost more and more in time, and especially as we get to these genetics that are watered down. Now, this is what shaped our culture. This was the foundation of what we consume today. Every land race, every hybrid, every clone-only cut, it carries something unique. a flavor, an effect, a story. And they weren't just names on the jar. They were like the building blocks. People knew by the look, the smell, immediately you knew what it was. And we're not just losing nostalgia, we're losing the diversity by forgetting this. It's becoming a situation where the old school genetics are losing the touch with the current market. And a lot of these younger consumers, when you hear something like Blue Dream or White Widow or AK-47, they scoff it off as old head mids. And a lot of this is because of what's been happening year after year after year. But when you think about it, a lot of these new ones do come from these older strains. And the biggest issue that I see is breeders who aren't labeling who the actual parents are. And that comes down to not giving credit to the original artist or the original breeder. And I feel like in most cases, that's because they want to have something that's proprietary and unique to themselves, so nobody else can go and copy it exactly. And that's where I feel we're losing a lot of touch with the original genetics that made these. Now, what inspired me to even think about this is the homie Swank. When he wanted me to build the website, I wanted to make sure that everything was listed properly. And he was so thorough with it, he wanted to make sure that every breeder's name was mentioned with the parent. But it got me thinking, you know, all his listings, he puts all of the breeders' names, the ones who helped create his genetics. And I think that's the biggest issue a lot of people are running into, is they don't know the parents of the genetics that they have. And if you're not listing on something like Seed Finder or really posting all of the lineage of your genetic, unfortunately, we end up losing connection with a lot of these, and we don't understand what builds the genetics, the building blocks, the key foundation of everything that we love and enjoy. And unfortunately, if we can't maintain the history of it, we don't know what we're looking for. And as more genetics come out, we're just relying on the names, and names don't necessarily equate to quality, to flavor, to experience, to anything. Now, throughout the market, this just spreads like the plague, because unfortunately, what's hot in one state eventually does become hot in another state, and it works its way around the entire country, and sometimes
shit, not just the city, the world.
I saw when I was in Germany, what was hot in California was clearly what was being said as a trend there. And oftentimes what you'll see on the East Coast sometimes will affect different areas in Canada. Canada's East Coast versus the West Coast or the Midland are totally different as well. But oftentimes, whatever catches a trend in one sector will work its way all the way through over time. Now think about the cookies craze, the runts craze, the gelatos. We're getting to the sherbs now. It's to the point where everything has its trend, kind of like music, but it gets so saturated that we end up losing the old school. We can't just decide to go step in the booth and make some old school style hip hop like the classic boom bap shit, because, well, genetics aren't like that. Genetics, we need something to preserve this. And a lot of places really overlook this, but there are some spots that really do preservation in some senses, but oftentimes this is just for hemp, which I don't know why we can't also get that for us, but you know, hemp, the legalities are a little different. Now, those are ones like USDA's National Plant Germplasm System. Through its Plant Genetic Resources Unit in Geneva, New York, this hemp collection is now part of the broader MPGS, which maintains over 600,000 unique crop ascensions for use by researchers, breeders, and educators worldwide. Then there's the IPK Gattersleben Institute in Germany. They manage its own plant genetic resources, and they support compliant open science preservation efforts as well. And really, they push for a genetic framework that brings genetic conservation. Now, if we had something like this, it'd be so much easier to understand these genetics, from the lineage to actually what's what, and to be able to maintain the integrity of some of these forgotten cultivars. Now, a lot of times these, again, are building blocks, but they may not be hot right now. If we lose these genetics over time, we're gonna lose these things to create new, diverse genetics, and we're gonna weaken and water down more and more what we have. We're gonna go from Todd McCormick's analogy of a whole crayon box to just a couple that you get at a cheap-ass restaurant. However, in this case, it really just seems like creativity is being stifled by profitability. And oftentimes, I see how business takes over good feelings and ethics and wants and needs of the consumer, but good business oftentimes is supposed to cater to the wants and needs of the consumer. But I guess I don't have any business acumen.
Oh, barely. I'm so dumb.
Now, why are genetics disappearing? Is this because the government? Is this because big corporate Canna is just destroying everything and they don't care about genealogy or actual quality lineage? Well, not really. Actually, this is primarily because the consumers want what they want. The masses sometimes are asses. And in this case, data actually proves it. There was a study that analyzed thousands of commercial flower samples across multiple US states. And they found that nearly all of them clustered into 3 dominant terpene types, which is kind of sad when you think about all of the terpenes that are out there. So the first would be the myrcene dominant, that earthy, musky, relaxing lines. Then there's the limonene or carophyllene ones, and that's more citrus spice associated with the cookies or the gelatos. And then there's the sweet side, and that's the terpinolene dominant side, which means no matter how flashy the strain names are or what they tell you it is, data shows that we only have a couple categories that we're getting when we go to these shops, or when we're ordering seeds these days even, which is pretty frustrating when you think about it. But when people are trying to keep up with what's hot in the market, it makes sense that they oftentimes will just replicate what's hot in the market. Being a trendsetter is not easy, and when you think about genetics, it takes a long time to find out what the trend is and to implement that into your breeding projects. Between finding the mother and father and trying to figure out exactly what works best for your setup, and also figuring out what the market wants the most, these are things that could take years, and by the time you develop this genetic, well, unfortunately, the market may have moved past wanting these things. So catching a trend is not as easy for the breeders, and with the commercial growers, they're keeping up with the Joneses as well. And that even works in the same case with a lot of home growers. And maybe not you, maybe not me, but the masses of people.
Not us. Not here.
Unfortunately, that's really what's dictating a lot of what we're seeing in the market. There's another study conducted that had thousands of samples across the country, and it still found majority of the flower was clustered into the same categories, as well as THC to CBD chemotypes. Now, this really just shows the homogeneity that's happening in this space, and it's really frustrating when you think about all of the different genetics that we have out there, how so many of them fall into these same categories. And it's not just chemistry, genetic surveys also back this up. Studies mapping whole genomes showing that common indicas and sativa labels don't match up to actual genetic groupings. Instead, much of the difference boils down to the variation at a small number of terpene regions in the genome. In other words, majority of these breeders and growers are selecting for the same lack of diversity, which is startling when you think about it. They just want to have their own version of it, their own name, their own offshoot, which realistically is the same as their neighbors, so to speak. So the picture is pretty clear that this market currently, and that's home grow and commercial grow, is dominated by the same trends. And it does change every few years, but it seems to be consistent, that there's only a few key indicators that are the differentiating factor. And that's kind of frustrating if you're into something that's more unique. Now, it's not just old strains that are falling out of style or, the trend. Research and industry data points to 4 major driving factors. First is the market's incentives to narrow the field. Now, in legal markets, lab data shows that the same trend happens over and over and over. Now, big producers chase what's familiar because it sells, not because it's what has full potential of the plant. And honestly, that pressure just squeezes the diversity out of the market more and more and more. And most times, these brands don't care because they're not consumers themselves. The second would be wheat conservation for drug-type varieties. Now, the resin-rich varieties grown for their flower potency and for their terpene contents, these are what researchers call drug types. And those are basically missing from public collections. Obviously, hemp has theirs covered, but we don't for herb. And then that means the genetics that most people consume for recreational or medicinal use is not being safeguarded at the federal level. Instead, it depends on the survival of private breeders or companies or private collections. And if those folks shut down or pass away, God forbid, the whole collection can vanish. And third, I'd say would be pathogens, which quietly wipe out whole collections. HLVD is totally widespread now across the US, and it seems a lot of people just end up killing stuff off. Now, I won't outright kill it. We got a video that goes over HLVD, but this is just something that essentially could dud your plant. And the scary part is it hides in clone libraries. A mother room can have it and carry it for years, and you wouldn't even know. Without tissue culture cleanup or strict sanitation, the entire collections of elite cuts can totally be gone without any warning. Fourth, I would say would be mislabeling. Genetic studies consistently show mismatches between what's on the label and what's in the plant. 2 samples with the same name often aren't the same, even closely. Now, over time, cuts passed around or seeds that are mislabeled through the underground, they can drift and people get confused and sometimes even rename these genetics for hype. That makes it hard to know what's real and what's not. It makes it harder than ever to preserve these authentic lines. Now, you put that all together, a market rewarding the sameness and lack of public backing for heavy resin lines or terpenes, the pathogens that come silently eating away your clones and collections, or mislabeled genetics even muddying this entire record. That's where the bottleneck comes, and that's the concern that I have. And it's why we're watching diversity slip away, not just from the hype cycles, but from the foundation of the plant itself. Now, the main thing is, without genetic diversity, we're not going to be able to maintain the dankness that we've had over the years. Without being able to keep some of these building blocks, we won't be able to build new things over time. And maybe you're okay with that. Maybe you're totally fine, but myself as a connoisseur, I would love to see more innovation. If not, at least preservation. Now, there's things that you can do as a home grower, of course, which we talked about there, but if there's some more stuff that you think would help, maybe that I didn't talk about, drop below in the comment section. And if you want to understand why new genetics kind of suck these days, check out this video up here. It'll explain a lot. Thanks for watching. Stay lifted.